Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Jason Miles, on another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. If you're new to the channel, welcome. So glad to have you here. If you like what we're doing, please hit like and subscribe. It's a passive gesture that goes a long way. If you're a returning listener, subscriber, or one of the very valued patrons, so glad to have you back. We'll be going to the champagne room tonight after the main show, and if you want to join us, there's a couple of ways, but the main way is become a patron. For as little as $3 a month or $30 for the year, you can access champagne rooms past and present. Join us for movie nights like we will be doing Thursday. We're gonna have a fun-ass movie night Thursday. You can also be a paid YouTube subscriber. I forget how much that costs. Sorry. But also, they get access to the champagne room and fun-ass movie night. Now, let's get to why we're here in the first place. That is, talking about Israel and Palestine. Almost 2 years into a brutal war that has taken the lives of tens of thousands, mostly innocent civilians, is there any end in sight? What will be Israel's ultimate goal? And what are the limits of Palestinian resistance? There is one lingering question that is on the minds of many, and that is Israel winning the war? Public sentiment seems to be surprisingly in favor of a free Palestine, one free from destruction and apartheid rule. Many people, even many Israelis, are demanding a ceasefire. While an agreement to a ceasefire was reached in January, it didn't take long for Israel to ignore their deal and continue with their genocidal mission to depopulate Gaza and the West Bank and put an end to Hamas's military and governing capacity in the region. Was the aftermath of October 7th the beginning of Israel's final solution? Are they approaching an endgame? These are three goals of the Netanyahu government. Israel wants to eliminate Hamas's military and governing capacity. In Israel's zeal to force Hamas to put down their weapons and release the remaining hostages, Israel has forced a blockade on all aid coming into Gaza, causing a massive famine and starvation, one of the many reasons several nations view Israel's tactics as genocidal. Secondly, Israel seeks to permanently restructure Gaza's geography, and security architecture, irrespective of Hamas. According to an article from International Crisis Group, Israel now directly controls at least 50% of Gaza's territory. Troops have expanded the buffer zone that rims the strip's perimeter, concentrating civilians in small coastal areas around Khan Yunis, Deir Balah in the southern part of the strip, as well as around Gaza City in the north. Some 400,000 people are there. Lastly, the far-right Israeli government is grasping at what it sees as a historic opportunity to deepen its control of all the occupied territories, both Gaza and the West Bank, and to deal a decisive blow to any plausible prospect for Palestinian self-determination. Notably, the renewed Israeli offensive was launched just 2 weeks after the Arab League, at a March 4th Cairo summit, endorsed a reconstruction plan for the Strip predicated on the return of the Palestinian Authority to governance and the future establishment of a Palestine state in both occupied territories. Agendas that the Netanyahu government rejects outright. But the question remains, can anything be done to stop Israel from reaching these cataclysmic goals? The answer lies not just in diplomatic maneuvering, but in the global response, or lack thereof, to what many are calling a genocide. International legal mechanisms have so far proven performative and toothless. The International Court of Justice's provisional measures have been ignored by the Israeli government. Western governments, particularly the United States, continue to supply weapons and political cover, even as public opinion within those same countries shifts increasingly in favor of a ceasefire and Palestinian rights. What can make a difference is the growing movement of global civil society, mass protests, academic and cultural boycotts, labor strikes, and divestment campaigns are putting pressure on institutions complicit in the war. Palestinian resistance, both armed and nonviolent, continues, as does international solidarity. Yet the question remains whether these forces can outpace Israel's rapidly advancing military and settler colonial project. In that sense, Israel may be winning, but in the narrow terms of land and control, but it's losing in the court of global public opinion and potentially in the long arc of history. The real defeat for Israel's far right government may come not on the battlefield, but in the growing recognition that lasting peace and security cannot be built on the ruins of a people's right to exist. To discuss this further with me, we have from Code Pink, another Code Pinker. We've had everybody from Code Pink on here but Medea. Nour Jaghama.
You have
press the wrong button. Press the wrong button. Oops. How are you?
Hi, Jason. Thank you for the applause. That was really sweet. I'm doing good. How are you?
Pretty good. Sorry for the long introduction, but there's a lot that we have to talk about today. So that being said, what does victory mean in the context of Israel's war on Gaza and the broader Palestinian territories?
Like in the grand scheme of things,
Yeah.
they have a plan.
Mhm.
If we're talking about Palestine specifically, I mean, push out every Palestinian and fully take over all of Palestine from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. I mean, it's that simple, really. Like, it's that straightforward. Just take over all of Palestine, which is why we see them operating the way that they are in Gaza right now.
Can a state, quote unquote, win a war if it loses legitimacy in the eyes of the global public?
I mean, it depends what type of goals we're talking about accomplishing here. Like I mentioned, Israel controlling, Palestine, kicking out all Palestinians and taking over Palestine. I think if that's their goal, then yes, they can achieve that goal. That's true. But if you lose in the court of public opinion, and, we're not just talking about we're not talking about a business. We're not talking about a McDonald's boycott, they're going to lose their profits, something like that. We're talking about a state that's establishing itself on the erasure of an entire group of people. That's not something that people in the world tend to take lightly. Like, if that's something that you care about, you tend to really care about it. And it's not just, not liking a country. Like, that's an ideology. That's how you live your life. At least for me, when I think about Palestine, I mean, I'm Palestinian myself, but, even if I think of land back here, like in the United States, it's not, I think of it as an insult to all of humanity to treat a group of people that way. And from that, not only is that not confined to that quote unquote war, that's imperialism that is not confined, like I said, to that space. It permeates throughout the world. Like the US, for example, they don't just oppress people here in the US. I mean, the US is a kind of an extreme example, but it creates systems of oppression globally. So if you have this war that's achieving these, imperial military goals, you're also just breeding resistance across the globe, because people's natural response to being oppressed is to resist. I mean, I don't know many people who just sit and allow somebody to completely stomp over their whole life and they don't do much about it. I mean, there are some people like that. But for the most part, if that is the war in question, then no, you can't win that war, because the inherent tragic flaw to imperialism is the resistance that it breeds. As long as imperialism exists, resistance will exist, which is, I would say, the extinguisher of imperialism. So no, you can't. You can probably win in the short term, but in the long term, I don't think so.
Why do you think the global public sentiment has shifted more in favor of a free Palestine? You said you're Palestinian, so I'm sure you've seen a massive shift, even from 2018, when there was protests on the other side of the wall and Israel was shooting at medics. there seems to be much more support. Do you think it has something to do with the fact that we're seeing these images of war so much via social media?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in my opinion, like, witnessing or just knowing the history of Israel's occupation of Palestine, since 1948, the strategy and the goal, like I said, to, take over Palestine has never changed. I would say the technology has changed and has allowed Israel to escalate to such the degree that they have today. So it is interesting that people's opinions have changed, and I do think it's exactly what you said, is that people are seeing it, and it's also so a level of devastation and brutality and just disgusting, despicable, unprincipled behavior by the Israeli military that you you genuinely have to be, like, so racist and lacking of humanity to support that. Like, it's genuinely weird to, like, think that it's okay to kill children, and, like, I don't think anybody hasn't seen a video that's come out of Gaza or at least, like, heard. I mean, it's just to such a degree that it is so impossible to ignore, um, that, yeah, I think seeing it in your face on your phone, I mean, for me, it's genuinely inescapable. Any social media I open, like, I'm seeing images from Gaza, which I think is the least we can do, bear witness to people's existence and what they're going through, but that's besides the point. Yeah, I think it's hard to see people suffering to such a degree and to think somehow that, like, that's okay, or to, because now, like, the definition even of supporting Palestine has changed. Back, like you mentioned, in 2018, for example, that was my first year of undergrad, and I remember genuinely, like, being shut down by my professor. I was a political science major, by the way. I escaped that, for the record. But I remember them, like, telling me, like, "Don't talk about Palestine," and, like, I would introduce myself, like, it's my first year of college. I grew up around a lot of Palestinians, so it was never weird for me to say I was Palestinian, but people would ask me, like, what that was. Like, "What's Palestine?" They don't know, and I would have to, like, give them the spiel. And then supporting Palestine was, like, I feel like, you knew about, like, the occupation, Israel's occupation of Palestine, you knew about the apartheid. There's, like, this whole thing, like, a lot of knowledge was kind of the threshold, I guess, for people to feel comfortable enough to support Palestine,
Mhm.
but now the barrier is very low, like, it's a genocide taking place. So, I think that a lot of people, it's easy and natural, like, I'm not saying easy in a negative sense, it's
Mhm.
natural to
Mhm.
not support a genocide. So, I think also the complication that people view Palestine with has also kind of dissolved a bit. It's, like, very straightforward. People are being bombed daily for
Do,
over a year and a half.
do you think it's a conflation of images? Palestine, Syria, even Russia, Ukraine. I mean, there's a lot of images of the destruction of war, and we are multiple generations in where people have never really. There's no Vietnam. I'm 47. There's no Vietnam for my generation. There's numerous people that are my age that have no idea of even the ethnic cleansing that took place in the 90s in Bosnia or Kosovo. So do you think now we're so kind of politically in tuned in a way that we weren't before years prior? Even again, even what is that, 8 years ago in 2018, 7 years ago
uh Like, as a whole, like,
as a whole,
as
yeah,
a people's
yeah.
politically in tune, I mean, in a way, yeah. I think not in the way that people would think. I think that
Maybe
in
not.
that
Maybe
time.
let me fix it. Not ideologically tuned,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
politics is theater in a way that I can't I don't remember politics as theater this much where so many people watch the folly of politics, watch the theater play out. And I think a lot of that has to do with, 2016 moving forward with the Trump administration, but that's another conversation for another time. But do you think that has something to do with the fact that there is so many eyes on what's going on now at a time? And also the universities that were protesting that had encampments, usually spit out the students that would work for large consulting firms that would be doing a lot of the oppression. So that's also kind of fascinating that Columbia and Princeton places like
I think, it's hard to say because I think that people do want to, even if there's an element of political theater, I think that is true, especially I think in certain areas where maybe, it's probably, maybe it's more popular to support Palestine in certain areas. I think so. Um, but I also want to believe, and I do actually think that deep down, people do feel isolated. They do feel like with the escalation of capitalism too in the last always since it
Sure,
existed.
sure, yeah.
It's always like something that's kind of like gotten worse and affects people's lives in a way where like the quality of their everyday life like genuinely has gotten worse. And I think that even if it's like a politic that they don't like recognize per se or like know that they're radicalized or whatever it is, I think that people do actually feel differently and like view power differently. um Especially I think maybe in the beginning a lot of people it was some sort of like aesthetic, and I think that that happens with any movement, but I genuinely think that this Palestine is a popular people's movement
Mhm.
because it resonates with people, and seeing Palestinian resilience really resonates with people. And I think especially through this last year and a half, people witnessing more than a year and a half, it's about a year and 7 months now, but
Mhm.
people witnessing the US government, like just actually seeing with their eyes the US government like throw people out of rooms and shut them down and say no, 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 no when people are begging to stop sending money to Israel, when they see so clearly that the US government is sending billions to Israel, and like they cut all the funding for like SNAP, schools, et cetera, like people are struggling. I think that sure sometimes there's aesthetics and there's certain ways that things happen. And that's unfortunate, but I do think that for the most part people actually do resonate and believe, but maybe, they need a little political education, maybe they need a little push to even fully realize like what they're saying themselves or what they're talking about themselves. But I think at their core people are kind of sick of things, and that makes sense to me, honestly.
When you tell people you're Palestinian, do they try to shut down any talk you have? Like, oh, it's because you're Palestinian, you're too involved.
Mm,
You're too close to the situation to really have a nuanced opinion.
yeah, I think to a degree, maybe people will start to say that, but like, first of all, it's really hard to get me to shut up. So, like, genuinely, that is not a conversation ender for me at any time. Um, but I think, yeah, maybe a little bit ago, people would say things like that to me, but then I would be like, actually, like, no, I could tell you firsthand stories of like my grandma having to sneak through the night while it's curfew and there's Israeli soldiers on the roof just to get like food for her kids. Like,
Mhm.
and then I think when people, hear stuff like that where they're like, okay, well, this is actually like a firsthand experience, whatever, like they open up. But yeah, some people will say you're too close. Nowadays, honestly, I haven't gotten much of that because it's genuinely so vile that it's not normal to think that it's it's not normal to
Yeah.
not be against genocide. Just period, end of story.
You think I'm
Yeah,
always surprised that people that I hear that I know, mostly in passing, that are still on the side of Israel. Um, it's baffling to me. What role does the humanitarian crisis, particularly famine, mass displacement, civilian deaths, play in shaping both the regional and international responses to the war?
Internationally, I'll start like just more on an international level. Um, I think that really helps. Like people sympathize, not helps. That was not the end of my sentence. It helps people see like how disgusting things are, and it helps people just understand like how much this affects just the people of Gaza, like what however they feel about military combatants, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that especially with Israel's siege. So if, like, for those of you who don't know, since March 2nd, Israel closed all Gaza's borders, so there was no like food, any type of nothing, no people or things entered or left Gaza. But just a few days ago, this new Israel and US backed foundation started distributing aid, quote unquote. It's kind of like this whole thing. And it's just in a way that's very unhumanitarian. There's like screenings to see that you're not politically affiliated with Hamas in order to get food, which is illegal against international law. Like, this is literally just straight up food as a weapon of war, like starvation as a weapon of war. That is a new level of just disregard for any type of laws or just normalness. Like, I just genuinely, it's like so hard to discuss this in like a very like legal or technical term, because just on a basic human level, it's just like, yeah, like that's just that's horrific. Like, there's no, I don't need to tell you which law, I don't need to point to a law to tell you that's horrific. It's just anybody with eyes can tell you that. But yeah, so that's a new level, right, of just impunity that Israel has reached. So I think that on an international scale, that it just helps, I guess, push people to like,
Mm-hmm.
have some sympathy, where it feels like it's not scary to support Palestine, because they know that they're supporting a group of people, even though regardless, that's what, you would be doing if you stand with Palestine, you stand with the people of Palestine. And regionally, I think, you might be asking this question to get at maybe like people feel like a certain type of way about leadership in Palestine or in Gaza, because they're like allowing Palestinians to be starved, whatever, if they just gave up their arms. I don't know if that's like where like the process of like the regional aspect, but um I think you're talking about regionally, like in Palestine, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um so whenever you're in a situation where, especially if you have like children or a family, people you love just in general, and you're in just super dire circumstances where that kind of like necessitate like you doing whatever it takes to support your family. Anything that you perceive as like getting in the way of that, of course, like you're gonna have some negative emotions
Mm-hmm.
like associated with that. Like, maybe the people of Gaza, maybe like somebody in Gaza before has thought like, man, why doesn't Hamas just like give themselves up, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
But it's more just the mindset of somebody who's undergoing a genocide, like, and it's not a reflection of any actual power, for example, that Hamas has, to control like food being let in, or anything like that. Because, on Hamas's terms, they would literally give up all of their hostages, and the second the bombs dropped and Israel ends their occupation of Palestine. It's like very simple terms. But yeah, it's, I think mostly though, if you are thinking regionally, what this humanitarian crisis has people feeling is just desperate. Like, I think people just really want this to end, and they're just undergoing the worst days of their life every day for the last year and 7 months. So I think that that's really all people in Palestine are thinking, are, can this end, one way or another. But also that Israel is doing this to them,
Mhm.
and they want to just live on their land like everybody else, like just regular people, just
And it was,
nothing.
yeah, it was already densely populated. That already had extreme kind of apartheid-like conditions they were living under before this happened, that there was activists, you know, fighting back against. My young 6-year-old son's first movie was Abby Martin's documentary. She was screening it in San Francisco when I lived in the Bay Area, and we went in there and checked that out when he was a small fella. So it's not like there hasn't been voices. I don't, again, you are a young Palestinian person. Um, what were the voices when you were younger? Like you said, you were an undergrad. Um, who was speaking out about Palestine back then? And are you seeing more people that feel emboldened to speak out now? And does it give you little bit of hope?
Yeah, I think what I remember most, and, maybe this is because I was in school, but students, like, even when before, like, being in college, I genuinely learned so much from Students for Justice in Palestine and just students willing to push the envelope and, like, talk about Palestine because they were in such a unique position to not lose so much. Or it's very different today. It's, like, actually completely different. Um, I think that I didn't see many professionals emboldened to talk about Palestine in their workplace because they were, like, super scared. And I see that being, like, very different now. A lot of people, are have lost their jobs and are willing to lose their jobs because they're, principled. Yeah, and I think now for sure, so I see all types of people who wanna say something about Palestine, like, so many the number one question I've been asked is, "What can I do?" Like, with what I have, like, with where I'm at, "What can I do for Palestine?" I'm an engineer, I work in tech, I work in healthcare, I work in whatever, whatever, like, "What can I do for Palestine?" So I think that now it's not, like, so concentrated, it's all across the board, it's really an issue that has united so many groups of people, I think, because it is so normal. Like, it's genuinely such a normal opinion, again, like, I keep going back to that it's everyday people that support Palestine, so now it's kind of cool to see Palestine in every place in a way where, like, people who wanna talk about Palestine and support Palestine in every place. So, yeah, definitely very different now. I mean, literally in the past, it would be so crazy to come across anything Palestinian, and I live in Chicago. There's a lot of Palestinians here, and now it's like I go on a walk, for sure I'm seeing a Palestine sticker at least, you know?
Mhm.
So it's yeah, it's a really crazy shift.
Well, what mechanisms exist to hold states accountable for violations of international law, and why do they so often fail? Can the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court influence the outcome or future of this war?
I think they would have if they could. Um, so also okay, so when I escaped political science, I moved to international studies,
Okay.
which it's just like a different it's just a
Mhm,
different trap.
mhm.
The people are
Different
cooler though,
flavor. It's a
in my
different flavor.
opinion.
Mhm,
Yeah, exactly.
mhm,
And literally through that, I learned that international law doesn't mean much, which is it sounds very negative. It's negative in a lot of ways, like in what you just said, can the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, actually play a role in ending Israel's genocide on Gaza? Um, no, because they would have, and I think that systems like that rarely ever, like, stop things in their place. They can't really because there's no, enforcer in the same way that we have, like, police, for example, in the US. Like, the police can physically go stop somebody from doing something, for example. There isn't something like
The
that
global
internationally.
the global police is the
Um
US, and the US is complicit, right?
Yeah, exactly. Especially with the power that the US has and the fact that the US backs this genocide so heavily, it's like if somebody really were to go enforce that, the US would bomb them, which they did, to
Mhm.
countries like Yemen who were stopping, Israeli ships in the Red Sea. What did the US do? They bombed Yemen. So, like, it's hard to enforce things when one international law isn't actually strong enough where it can actually stop something from happening. And two, when the US has such gross power that anybody who actually does try to stop what's happening in Gaza, Israel's genocide campaign, gets punished for it so severely.
Mhm.
So, short answer, no. Um, but the good thing, okay, I'm not gonna just talk negatively, is that I think international law, a big aspect of its power is how much power we give it. So
Mhm.
I think that international law for us as I don't even wanna say like organizers, as people against genocide, or just like another synonym for that is regular people. As like those people, we can call on international law, we can use international law as a tool in advocating for the people of Palestine, for example. So like we can call on international law to create like this global like pressure cooker like on Israel, for example. Like we can use that as one way to build pressure against Israel. I think for the most part they'll be useful after the fact, unfortunately. Like, you know, maybe bringing justice to like one like Israeli like lieutenant or the minister of defense, or like, you know what I mean? Like maybe we'll have like these wins where people who took part in this genocide will be brought to justice in these international institutions. But I think they're more tools for us and not something that we should place, you know, all of our hope in
I mean,
at all.
recently, again, I don't know how much you were following this, but Rodrigo Duterte was the former president of the Philippines, who was part of a brutal law and order campaign where he was trying to stomp out crime by literally just having people shoot quote unquote drug users. Actually got
Horrible.
arrested by the international courts. That's the Philippines. Are those kind of the only nations that suffer under the international courts? Smaller governments? Is it really possible that we could see anyone in Israel's governing body right now
You know,
be
I think,
arrested by a global court?
you know, like I don't like to say anything is impossible just in general. And I think like with the right conditions, with the right stakes on the line, like maybe it's like we get this guy, but we don't get this guy. Like we're probably not going to get Trump.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? We're not going to get Biden. He's already got, not going to lie. But like, you know, maybe we'll get like a little bit like a lower ranking, like military chief or something like that. Um,
So
yeah,
you
that's
think
just
heads
my
are going to
prediction.
do you think you feel comfortable that someone's head's going to roll when whatever's said and done means um that
Mm,
there will be some
in my
political
most,
casualties?
I mean, I would never say that for
Mhm.
certain at all, like by any means, not even close. In my most positive mindset, I hope that we get at least one, is what I'm saying. But I don't think that suddenly a year and 7 months in, you know, they're gonna be like, somebody's got to put a stop to this, and it's going to be us. I don't think the ICJ is like suddenly going to like rise up and be like our hero. I think that after the fact, if a bunch of people care enough and put enough pressure and do the work for the ICJ,
Mhm.
we, you know, organizations like Dawn, who have already like compiled recommendations to the ICC to go after Biden administration officials. I think
Mhm.
it'll be organizations like that that actually do all the work and then go to these institutions that actually have the power, and tell them, hey, like you should do this. And then I think if like the whole world rallies behind them and says, yeah, bring this person to justice, then I think we would have created the right conditions for that to happen. But I think all of those conditions would have had to happen. I don't think it's out of, you know, the proper functioning of these international institutions.
Gotcha. What forms of resistance, both within Palestine and globally, are proving most effective in challenging Israel's actions?
I think globally, a lot. I think there's a very strong form of resistance called journalism with integrity. And I think that journalists in Gaza and the very few outside of Gaza that decide to accurately report on Palestine, um, are doing, I think, one of the greatest forms of resistance against Israel. And believe it or not, I think Israel would genuinely be doing worse if it wasn't for these journalists. I think the only thing that has stopped them from just putting lights out on Gaza in one day is if whether or not they actually have the weapons to do that in one day, and then it just the fact that there would be an international uproar. I mean, there kind of has been, but you know. And I think that is because of people who are actually talking about Palestine, reporting accurately on Palestine, posting about Palestine. I think that if we didn't have this many people talking about it, it definitely would have happened a long time ago. So I think that is one really effective thing. And I think that earlier when we were also talking about like the aesthetics of activism, I think that one thing people think is an aesthetic is posting about Palestine, but that's actually not. It's so underreported that we need to, like, it's not just like, it's not an aesthetic thing to just post about Palestine on your story. Like, that's actually truly something that we need people to be doing still at this point. I think other effective resistance have been direct actions on like weapons shipments and things like that, and also just like the People's Arms Embargo campaign generally. There's one campaign specifically called Mask Off Maersk that was started by Palestinian Youth Movement, which Code Pink proudly partners on that campaign. I think movements like that play a role in creating global pressure against Israel, and I think that feeds into also, you know, Israel kind of like pulling back. And even this new aid distribution plan is only a veneer, which, you know, it is a veneer, sure, at the end of the day, but I do believe that it's because there's so much public pressure that Israel has to like at least do something. I mean, and Netanyahu kind of admitted it himself. He said, you know, our friends don't want it to look like we're starving people. So there you go. Like, look, Israel looking like it's doing something, for example, is very influential. The way people like feel about Israel really influences the way Israel acts. And then forms of resistance within Palestine. I mean, there has been resistance on the ground to Israeli troops, which in on the ground battles, Israel has not been doing well at all. Their military strategy and what they're best at is dropping bombs on civilians. So when it comes to on the ground combat, they fail pretty miserably. And yeah, there was, you know, so that's been successful in pushing Israel out of, you know, certain areas, or, you know, not allowing them to advance into certain parts of Palestine, like Gaza City, for example. Back in January, in that first ceasefire, that first temporary ceasefire that took place, which was genuinely not even a ceasefire. Israel was still killing people during that time. Before then, Israel, you know, kept coming back to the negotiation table with negotiations of, you know, they had like they didn't want a permanent ceasefire, for example. They just wanted a temporary 6-week ceasefire, and not to further their plan to do like the second and third phase. And then they went back in the north, in the on the ground combat, they kind of got their asses whooped a little bit. So then Israel came back to the negotiation table and said, okay, we'll go with this like ceasefire deal. We'll go with the ceasefire in January. So, I mean, that was pretty direct, right? Like, if that got Israel back to the negotiation table and influenced them to accept a ceasefire deal back in January. So, yeah, I think those are really effective. I think BDS is also extremely effective. I think that's more effective, like on the financial sector, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. And we definitely need more work on like the sanctions and the divestment, you know, having international institutions actually divest from Israel. I think that would really influence Israel to stop what it's doing. But I think, unfortunately, just with the support Israel has had from the United States, it's feels pretty untouchable. So I think that a lot of people might feel like these forms of resistance aren't actually working. But on the ground, Israel is not doing well. Like that's why they kill all these people. Their military strategy is to kill as many Palestinians as possible, starve as many people as possible, in the hopes that Hamas will just like lay down their arms, and not just Hamas, any armed groups in Gaza will lay down their arms and surrender. But like I said earlier, when you oppress people, inherently you're going to breed resistance. So it's kind of an impossible military goal to achieve.
Recently, it's come out that there's literally software that the United States is working with Palantir, which is Peter Thiel's foundation, to find out if anybody's been posting any sort of pro-Palestinian things and start monitoring those people, possibly for detention. Has that changed anything in the way you guys do stuff at Code Pink?
I mean, we just say normal things, like I said, like,
I mean, it doesn't take much anymore, you know?
I mean, yeah, but the difference is that we say things because we believe in them, and we, like, I mean, what should we do? Like, not post about Palestine for, like, if
Oh,
that,
no. Yeah. I'm saying,
like, if
are you
that
seeing
is,
are you seeing anybody get a little frightened at the reality? Because there's,
yeah.
again, back to what I said earlier, there's anti-war protests from the late 60s. Let's just take 68, for example, where the U.S. actually shot its own citizens and killed some people, right? Kent State, and after that, I think it was the next day or next week, it was Jackson State, where 2 more protesters were shot and killed. They don't shoot at protesters like that anymore. There was sanctuary states were kind of the response to Trump's effed up immigration policy 8 years ago. And now their solution to dealing with that is saying, well, since you want to be a sanctuary city and not work with ICE, well, we're just going to arrest everybody. We're going to arrest the babies. We don't care. They didn't do anything. They're going to an appointment. Doesn't matter because there's a bad person somewhere. We're going to arrest them because you didn't play ball. This is your fault, which is a strategy. I don't think it's the strategy is working. And the strategy seems to be for Israel-Palestine. If you're pro-Palestinian, you're anti-Semitic. We're going to tar you with some anti-Semitic propaganda and now possibly arrest you or deport you if we can, especially if you're here on any sort of visa whatsoever. Are any of these things working in your opinion, or are they building a bigger resistance?
I like to think that they're building a bigger resistance, but I know that people on a personal level get scared by things like this. Definitely. I mean, yeah, it's the US government. They kill people who don't agree with them. Like, I get it. So I think that, there's people who maybe won't post about Palestine because, like, they're looking for a job, or yeah, I mean, recently people who are undocumented, like, haven't been going to protests, which I think is a smart move. So in that sense, I do think some people choose to lay low. But I do think that the more the US proves that it will do anything to its own citizens to protect a foreign state, the more people will be like, "Well, what the hell?" Like, we don't, like, no, we're not gonna stand for that, and I think that, if anything, the extremism of the US government does make people more willing to resist, because at a certain point, when you take so much of people from people, they don't have anything to lose. So, at the end of the day, then what do we have except our principles and our values? So I think that people will hold on to that. I do think that maybe right now we're in kind of like a murky, like, middle area where some people are a little scared. Some people are pulling back, but I think for the most part, I haven't seen the movement waver in the way that the US government or Israel would like to see it waver, and it's not going to. Because Palestine teaches such principles of steadfastness, and I think that the US should have, like, they should have had Meta, like, set up some algorithm that blocked that word, because I see genuinely, like, the whitest people, like, we're saying that we're steadfast in our movement for Palestine, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"That's literally insane, and I love you,
Mhm.
and then where did you learn that? And I love you again." So, like, I think that people have genuinely surprised me in the most positive way possible, and I think that we saw so many people talk about Palestine after October 7th that naturally it does feel like less people are talking about Palestine now that we're a year and 7 months in, right? But when you zoom out and you look at 77 years of Israeli occupation in Palestine, to me, it's clear as day that we still have the most people ever, the strongest movement, the the highest peak in the movement for Palestinian liberation than ever before. And I think that for me, it's really hard to like be jaded or to think that people aren't talking about Palestine anymore because like I know what it looks like when people aren't talking about Palestine. It looks like people are asking me what the hell that is. So like I think there are people who have to take certain precautions and that makes sense, and I think those people genuinely find different parts of the movement for them to be a part of. And I think that people have been pretty strategic and they're not letting up because this is genuinely something so disgusting and like I said, so vile, so just there aren't even words to describe how nasty and devastating Israel's genocide campaign has been. That people are like, no, we're still gonna say something, we're still gonna talk about it, and I think that is really cool, actually.
How has the U.S. foreign policy toward Israel and Palestine changed under different administrations, and what does this current trajectory under Trump suggest? What responsibility does the U.S. have in either enabling or preventing further atrocities, in your opinion?
Mm, so, in terms of changes, I mean, um, in the past, it's just actually just been different levels of support, like, if I'm being honest.
Mhm.
The US has pretty much always been a supporter of Israel, and, like, going to pretty great lengths to help Israel succeed in their imperialist goals because those are the same goals as the US. I think there have been different levels of, like, red lines, but even if, like, say we talk about, like, in the last, like, 20 years, for example. That's, like, a long time. I'm 25, so I don't know, maybe that's just, like, messing with my timelines, but, it's always been, like, money, here, take everything you need, impunity, like, go ahead, just, like, a green light for Israel. So, yeah, and then you said how it's changed under Trump. I think under Trump, it's actually a little interesting because Trump is so obviously a businessman, like, there are people in Trump's circle that are Zionists because they are Zionist, but there are, others, and I believe, like, Trump himself this might be crazy. I don't even know if I should say this, but, like, I don't know if Trump, like, himself, like, cares for, like, Israel in the sense that, like, he believes, like, Palestinians should be erased, like, genuinely, like, I don't even think, like, we have that much space in his head as that
I
of, like,
don't.
an
Yeah,
ideology. Like,
yeah.
I think that he sees profits and he sees things like that, like, I think he's more motivated at things like that, like, on a business side. Um, but, like, Biden, for example, like, Zionist, like, actually, like, his political career, shows that he actually supports Israel, like, as a country. He would like to see the erasure of Palestinians. Um, so I think, like, with Trump, it's, like, kind of funny,
Mm,
because he'll, like, kinda sneak diss Netanyahu a little bit, but at the end
mhm.
of the day, he's giving him billions of dollars. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that if it hurts his pockets, then he will I'm not gonna say support Palestine, like, he's never gonna say from the river to the sea or anything like that, but, like, I think that it's interesting because it's a little less dependent on, like, his beliefs, like, it's a little easier to sway him, I guess, with, like, money, and also, this isn't me downplaying the impact of, like, Trump's involvement in Gaza's genocide campaign, like, he has said unbelievably disgusting things, and armed Israel and allowed them to brutally murder in cold blood children, women, men, like everybody in Palestine, bomb hospitals. So like this isn't me saying like, oh, Trump's a better dude. Like he's not. I'm just saying like that's how I feel, you know, he would operate differently. And I think you asked me something else too in that, but
Oh
honestly
no,
I
I
don't
mean, I
remember.
want to say I agree with you. I don't think I think he's so filled with you know, pro wrestling bluster that he just kind of says anything. And
Yeah.
one thing he's good at, and I don't mean this in any sort of accolade whatsoever as an accolade, but you know, you put a camera on him, he's going to say something retarded. And you put a camera on him about any international issue, he knows as much about that as I know about the career of Bobby Hull. Like I give no fucks about hockey.
Didn't
Right?
even know who that
Well, you
was.
know,
No,
he's
period.
probably been out of the game for longer than you've been alive. So that's okay. You're even younger than my child. So so that's how old I
Oh,
am.
well,
But
I have younger sisters that make me feel old, but you know.
oh, don't worry. This is a show full of old people as well. So, we embrace our age on this show, or at least I do.
Same.
But yeah, it's I agree with you that I don't think Donald Trump has any sort of political ideology. Even when he talks about Mara Gaza and the
Yeah, that
AI
was
video that it is so tasteless
yeah.
that
I think he just liked the video.
I again, yeah, it doesn't take when you don't know, like honestly, it's kind of like a child. And people
Yeah.
have to understand that we have a child president in office for the second time. Because the only thing he really understands is like revenge, right? This is everything we're seeing is about vengeance. Even arresting 3,000 immigrants today is not about a wave of immigration. It's just about vengeance because that was ground he lost on. And
Yeah.
this, you know, is a continuation that I think is out it's out of control for him even, which is why I think he does, you know, kind of jab at Netanyahu somewhat because Netanyahu is a bit smarter than Trump, and that's not saying much. And he's extremely conservative. Maybe this is the most conservative government we've seen in Israel, at least in my lifetime. So, you know, this is kind of a crazy time we're in right now. How have back to the conversation at hand? How have mainstream media narratives shifted or not, in your opinion, in coverage of the war, and what impact does that have on the public perception?
Well,
Is or let
in the
me let me
begin
let me let me help you with this. Is independent and alternative media playing a more significant role in shaping discourse around this conflict?
Yeah, I mean, I think people, especially in like right after October 7th, how those mainstream media outlets just kind of proved that they were idiots, like proved that they were sellouts. I mean, I think people kind of knew that in a way. But like maybe in like a little bit more of like a conspiracy theorist way. But like just repeating like lies, like mouthpieces of not even just the US government, like the Israeli government, you know, covering for the Israeli military. They spread like lies about, you know, the 40 beheaded babies, the raped women on October 7th, like all of these things. Um, and I think that people saw that and hopefully saw that it was debunked. I think like a good chunk saw that it was debunked, or at least months later saw that at the very least, they shouldn't be providing this much cover for a military that's literally killing indiscriminately, just bombing like uh, crowded civilian areas. So I think that people kind of saw that and maybe turned to like independent media, tried, you know, are trying to get their news from other places. I think a lot of people just turn to like the people in Gaza directly because that's how they knew they can get the truth. I think that independent media has been extremely important in that sense because people really like cannot. trust the mainstream media's reporting on Palestine, like, at all. And I think that they kind of saw that people were like, "Damn," like, they were really like, "Damn," like, they figured us out, like, they know that we're lying. Like, a couple of them, I don't think well, none of them have ever apologized for their lies, so it kinda just shows you that, they don't really care, like, kinda just happened, like, they just don't want it to hurt their pockets. Um, and they haven't shifted to, like, covering Palestine in, like, the most honest way ever, like, not even close. I think that they tried actually, I'm giving them way too much grace. Um, they failed miserably. They abandoned their colleagues in Gaza, the journalists in Gaza who have literally put every single thing on the line, their lives, the lives of their
Yeah.
families,
Yeah.
to talk about what's happening in Palestine, and the media here has just failed miserably. They don't even come close to doing them justice. Um, and I think people realize that, and they lost a lot of viewership for that. I mean, I'm definitely never gonna, like, look to them for facts. I think a lot of people, even before this, probably
How does
felt
your
that way.
family handling everything as far as like news reports? Do they have things that they watch, or they just kind of try to,
Um,
I'm sure it's hard.
they yeah, it's difficult, of course. I mean, it's, like, obviously not easy to, like, actually, like, digest
Yeah.
the repercussions of Israel's genocide campaign in Gaza. But my family is, like, very committed to our land, our homeland. So nobody is, like, necessarily, like, shying away from, news or anything like that. Al Jazeera is big in my household. But yeah, I think all of us watch the news, like, really closely every day. And we have family in Palestine, in the West Bank. I have a couple friends in Gaza, but I mean, they're just going through the worst of it. But in the West Bank, they try to, like, put on a good spirit and
Mhm.
stuff. Like, I can tell that life is really hard for them right now. But they'll be like, "Don't be scared, like, you still come to Palestine." Like, I'm not scared. Don't ever say scared and me in the same sentence in terms of Palestine. Like, I'm not scared to visit my homeland, you know? But,
Yeah.
she like, my great aunt, for example, like, she wants me to come visit, so she's, like, telling me, like, "It's okay, everything's fine." But I know that, like, they can't drive home at night, for example. They have to, like, make sure they're home before it's dark out because there's, like, a settlement really close to the village my parents were born in. So
Yeah.
they, like, the settlers, like, throw rocks at them at night. Anyway, that's a tangent.
Jesus.
Um, yeah, that's just like a casual, like, Monday night for them. Just unemployed as hell.
They're
But
just having fun. The
yeah.
settlers are just having fun. They just throw rocks at these
Oh, yeah, like,
nondescript.
actually.
Yeah.
Like a car to them is like a game, like, how many times can we hit this car with however many rocks, but, yeah, so, I mean, it's hard to digest, but at the end of the day, like, that's our home and our people, and we have a responsibility to them, so we kinda just gotta do what we gotta do, you know what I mean?
Mhm. Mm.
If that makes sense.
Oh, it
We
is.
kinda just, like, are like, "Well, let's digest that later. Right now, we just need to lock in, care about
Just
Palestine."
survive. Yeah. If Israel continues on its current path, what are the likely long-term outcomes for both Israelis and Palestinians, in your opinion?
Well, if they I mean, continuing on this path genuinely, like, can't continue much longer, like, they will kill everybody in Gaza, either directly or through starvation or maybe, like, exile everybody altogether, um, and I think that, the land in Gaza too is just even at this point, like, destroyed to a degree where it's just going to take some real, like, science to revive it. But no, we're looking at, like, years, generations of trauma in Gaza,
Yeah.
um, years of rebuilding Gaza, and I think that ultimately, like, this isn't good for Israel either, like I said, oppression breeds resistance. So this degree of brutality is going to breed an equivalent level of resistance. So I think like as long as Israel continues to commit these crimes, they are making their people increasingly more unsafe because they're opening the door for a response to what they're doing. And from the moment Israel decided to establish its state on another people's land, like they have been putting the people that decide to live there in a very unsafe situation, and that has only escalated. And if it continues, I mean, it's just going to basically not be good for people living in occupied Palestine and Israel, and then people living in like the West Bank and Gaza.
And where can people support Code Pink, and what do you guys have planned next? If you can talk about it.
I don't know, it's like, how long do I have? But if you want to support us on social media, you can follow us at Code Pink or Code Pink Alert on any of our social medias. On Instagram, it's Code Pink Alert. I think on Twitter, it's Code Pink, but just type code and we'll probably pop up, I'm just kidding.
All caps.
Yeah, all caps. And if you go to codepink.org, that's our website where we have like a lot of things going on. If you go to our Palestine page, you'll see our different campaigns. Right now we have a Trader Joe's campaign. I mentioned the Mask Off Maersk campaign. We have a culture and propaganda campaign where we talk about journalists and, like we just discussed, mainstream media here in the US and the culture of occupation. We have a healthcare workers campaign to free detained medical staff, those detained from Gaza. And we also have a BDS campaign. I can go on and on and on. But if you want to take action for Palestine, we have a ton of resources and toolkits on our website. If you're like an online type of person, there are petitions you can sign. There's letters you can send to different companies and individuals that are involved in Israel's occupation and genocide of Palestine. There's also, if you're trying to, challenge yourself a bit, we have things that you can take outside with you and talk to people about Palestine. And if you're like willing to just go crazy, we have guides for like really low barrier events you can put on in your community to talk about Palestine. And if you're just trying to go like batshit insane, we have a fast for Gaza, which is like there are like a couple ways you can engage with it. There's like a full-on hunger strike. There's like a few calories a day you can do, and the idea is to fast and then donate that money to groups on the ground that are feeding people in Gaza. And if you're like off the fucking, I mean, so sorry. Oh my God, I'm sorry. I don't know.
You can totally curse. This is a very
okay. If you're just trying to go off the rails, and also I'm just kidding, like this is not off the rails, but there's a march to Gaza actually from Cairo that is happening on June 15th, and there's only a couple more days left to sign up. So if you go to our website, you'll see it's listed as June 15th on our events page, because that's when the march is actually going to happen. But sign up there, and I'm gonna actually give you guys all the information, and then go to marchtogaza.net. Find like your country. You'll see it's like countries who are like already like marching to Gaza, something like that. Scroll down on the page. It's a very interesting website. I don't know who made it, but then you'll see your country. Click that. It'll take you to Telegram. You fill out some forms. Do that ASAP. June 7th is the last day you can apply, and a bunch of people applied. I think this is like one of the most revolutionary actions that's happened since October, the day the genocide started on October 7th. And yeah, it's literally a march to Gaza. So definitely fill that out, apply. And yeah, we have a lot of stuff. See, I told you I could keep going, but I won't.
You lasted an hour, so congratulations.
Wow.
Wherever you guys are watching or listening to this show later, there is a link in the description to the Code Pink website. It's the first thing before I even describe the show. Bam! There's a link to the Code Pink website. Thank you, Nour, so much for taking the time to speak with me. Hopefully, we can get you back on the show at some point. I hope this wasn't too difficult for you. It wasn't too boring.
No, I love this. What do you mean?
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, and your chat is pretty nice. I've seen some, like, really mean ones, so
There's, it's all, I don't know what brings people out to the chat. There's usually a handful of people that watch the show all the time that are in the chat. There's a lot of inside jokes that you probably won't get. Let me see if I see one. Oh, there is one. We have a super chat from Ken. Nour's thoughts on carrot raisin salad.
like, if that's what it sounds like.
But that's a thing.
Wait,
It's a real thing.
is this an inside joke? Because I
It
don't
is
wanna
it's an inside. I actually eat it, and the people that watch this show make fun of me for eating it.
Well, I am not a picky eater.
There you have it. I am not the only one that thinks.
Well, I don't know what that is though, but yeah, I'm
You've
not
never
picky.
had. Well, the next time I'm in Chicago, we'll meet up, and I will make you carrot raisin salad.
Okay. How about when you do that, I'll also make what I think carrot raisin salad is, and then, like, we'll, like, evaluate.
See what?
I'm so serious.
I've never had anyone say that. I'll make what I think it is. I'm here for that. I am here for that salad off.
And I'm gonna win.
For me, those two things together are always a great combination. But that's just me personally. I don't serve it to anyone else. But when I said I ate it, the people that view this show went after me. They were like this.
We coming for you, nigga.
And it was nonstop. It was nonstop. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that you guys have your inside joke. I
Yeah.
like carrot cake too. Whoever just said that.
Yeah, carrot cake is awesome. See, there's also
Fire.
raisins and carrot cake.
Are they raisins? Yeah,
There's
they are.
definitely if you're eating a real carrot cake and there's no raisins in it, you take that carrot cake, you throw it at the person that gave it to you and said, "Don't you ever serve me this lie again. This abomination."
That's so crazy, but I will keep that advice in mind.
Yeah. Well, you're from a very blue collar, confrontational city.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm trying to be less confrontational, but
Well, look, we got to go because they're starting to make fun of me way too much. I'm gonna go to the campaign room where we can have more uncensored fun. Nour, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Code Pink, and have a very good evening. Go Bears.
Go Bears.
I love the Bears. Bears are going to be my second team this year because I'm all in on Caleb Williams. That's a different show that we do on Wednesdays. We talk about sports. Until then, come hang out with me in the champagne room. You guys can make more inside jokes that only we will get because it's just us. It's just us friends. And we're going to look at all the things that we're not supposed to look at. I'm going to show you guys some of the things that I've been sending Mac. I've been sending him the most insane reels. You're going to love it. Thank you, guys. And we are... Wait, where did it go? Out.